We live in a world just overflowing with information. I mean, it's literally at our fingertips, right? Google, social media feeds, news alerts popping up constantly. It's like an endless stream. But, despite having all this incredible access, are we really getting the full picture? Sometimes it feels like the very tools meant to connect us can actually, well, narrow our worlds instead. They can push us into these digital corners without us even realizing it. So today we're doing a deep dive into two really relevant and, frankly, maybe a bit concerning phenomena: echo chambers and filter bubbles. Huh. Our mission for you today is simple. We want to unpack what these terms actually mean, figure out how they operate, look at the real world impact they're having, and crucially, what we can maybe do about them. And we're drawing all this directly from a stack of really insightful sources you shared with us. Okay, so at its simplest, an echo chamber, that's like an environment where you're mostly exposed to information or opinions that just reinforce what you already believe. Super common on social media, right? And then filter bubbles, they're closely related. But that's more about the personalized algorithms, limiting your exposure to different perspectives by, feeding you content based on your past clicks and likes.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating, I think, is that while these ideas feel super modern because of social media, the underlying human tendencies, they're actually ancient. We've always sort of gravitated towards the familiar. What's new, and what our sources really highlight, is how today's technology acts like this massive amplifier for those tendencies. And if you look at the bigger picture, this amplification has a really profound impact on public discourse, definitely political polarization, and even just how you consume information day to day.
Okay, so if the echo chamber is the space where your views just get bounced back at you, reinforcing everything, leading to maybe misinformation, confirmation bias, that sort of thing, then the filter bubble sounds like it's the mechanism, is that right? Like the algorithms working behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Almost too helpful sometimes, tailoring everything just for you.
Right. It's like the internet's trying to customize your experience, which sounds good. But in doing that, it can inadvertently build these walls, create a really narrow view of the world.
Yeah, it's a bit like giving someone a personalized buffet, but they only ever see their absolute favorite dish. They completely miss all the other amazing options on the table.
Precisely. And that brings up a really crucial point from the sources we looked at. While these echo chambers definitely exist, the research suggests they might not be quite as widespread or maybe as impermeable as we often perceive them to be. Many people do still get news from different places, different viewpoints.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is, right? It raises this important question. If the data is a bit more nuanced, why does it feel so much like everyone's stuck in their own bubble?
Yeah, why that perception?
And it's a good reminder, too, that this isn't just an online thing. These dynamics exist offline in our communities, our social circles, our workplaces.
Okay, so we've got a handle on what they are and this interesting point about maybe perception versus reality. But to really get why they're so powerful, we need to peel back the layers, understand how they actually work, how they take root in our minds and, on our screens. Our sources point to 5 key characteristics that really make an echo chamber tick. First one: selective exposure and its close cousin, confirmation bias. This is basically you or me or anyone actively seeking out content that already fits with what we believe. It feels comfortable, right?
Right, it's natural.
And then platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they kind of learn this. Their algorithms kick up on it and start tailoring your feed to reinforce those preferences, which means you see less and less stuff that might challenge you. Second, there's homophily. Fancy word, but it just means a very human tendency we have to hang out with people who are like us, who think like us.
Birds of a feather.
Exactly. And online, this forms these really tight, closed information loops where different views might be totally absent, or if they do pop up, they get dismissed pretty quickly. Third characteristic: group polarization. This one's quite striking. It's not just that your opinions get reinforced in the chamber. Discussions within that like-minded group can actually make everyone's opinions become more extreme over time.
Mutual reinforcement pushes the average viewpoint further out.
Yeah, everyone's nodding along, validating each other, maybe pushing the envelope a bit further each time. Fourth, misinformation and disinformation. Echo chambers are just, well, fertile ground for this stuff.
Extremely.
Because you're less likely to bump into fact checks or critical analysis from outside the group. False info can just circulate and recirculate, getting stronger each time. And finally, number 5 is emotional contagion. The content inside these chambers often has a really strong emotional flavor, right? Often negative anger, outrage, fear.
Yeah, emotion drives engagement online.
And that emotion can be contagious. It influences your emotional state. which can dig those beliefs in even deeper, making you even more resistant to anything that contradicts them.
So if we zoom out a bit from those characteristics,
Mhm.
what's actually driving them? What are the underlying causes? It's this really fascinating and, yeah, sometimes unsettling mix of the technology itself and just basic human psychology. The sources we looked at point to four main causes. First up, and maybe the most talked about, is algorithmic filtering. Social media platforms, search engines.
Yeah.
They use these recommender systems, their main goal. Engagement, likes, shares, comments, time spent watching.
Keep you on the platform.
Exactly. The problem is, the algorithms often figure out that emotionally charged content, controversial stuff, that's what gets the clicks, that gets the engagement. So it creates this powerful feedback loop. It can unwittingly feed users more and more extreme or polarizing content, even if that wasn't the platform's specific goal.
Huh.
Second cause is simply user behavior. It's not just the algorithms pushing stuff on us.
Yeah.
Beyond that selective exposure we mentioned, it's a natural human thing to gravitate towards stuff that makes us feel good, that reinforces our existing views.
It feels validating.
It does. And you get that social validation too, likes, positive comments when you share something that fits the group's narrative. That reinforces the behavior. Thirdly, cultural and political factors. These play a huge role. In environments that are already deeply polarized, think about certain aspects of American politics. For example, echo chambers just form much more readily around those partisan ideologies. And the platforms can actually facilitate this by making it easy to create very homogeneous online communities, groups, pages.
So the existing divides get mapped onto the online world and maybe amplified.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And lastly, we need to consider other cognitive biases beyond just confirmation bias. The sources bring up things like correlation neglect. That's our tendency to kind of overlook statistical relationships, maybe see patterns that aren't really there, or draw faulty conclusions.
Yeah.
Or selection bias, where we instinctively, maybe unconsciously, cherry-pick the information that concerns what we already think, and we just ignore the stuff that challenges it.
Yeah.
These subtle biases really add fuel to the fire, helping build and maintain those echo chambers.
Okay, so we've got the algorithms, our own behavior, the political climate, these cognitive quirks. When you put all of that together, what does this actually mean for us, for society? The consequences sound pretty tangible and maybe a bit stark. Well, one big one is increased polarization. That seems obvious, but the impact is huge. Individuals get so dug into their views, they become less and less willing to even talk to people with opposing perspectives, let alone find common ground.
Right. Constructive debate becomes almost impossible.
And that can lead to political gridlock, legislative paralysis, and just this widespread distrust in institutions, in the media, even in science sometimes. Two, there's the rapid spread of misinformation. We touched on this, but it's a major consequence. The lack of critical scrutiny inside the bubble just lets false or misleading stuff spread like wildfire. And the sources give a really powerful example, the 2016 U.S. election. Echo chambers on platforms like Facebook and Twitter clearly played a significant role in spreading fake news stories very effectively.
Yeah, that was a real wake-up call for many.
Three, you can see reduced critical thinking if you're only ever exposed to a narrow range of views.
Your critical thinking muscles don't get much of a workout.
Exactly. It can stifle intellectual diversity. It makes people less able to evaluate evidence properly, spot faulty arguments, or even just, entertain an alternative viewpoint for a moment.
Okay.
And fourth, it sounds like it leads to social fragmentation. Individuals become kind of isolated in these insular online communities, which just makes the cultural and societal divides even wider.
It's like different segments of society end up speaking completely different languages, operating with different sets of facts.
Yeah.
And to give you some really concrete examples that came up in our sources, thinking about political echo chambers, we already mentioned 2016. The data showed pretty clearly that on platforms like Facebook and Twitter, supporters of, say, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were largely segregated. They were in these distinct online communities, and there was surprisingly little interaction between them.
So not just a slight preference, but a real digital divide.
A profound one, yeah. Then you see it really strongly with conspiracy theories. Communities built around things like QAnon or flat Earth beliefs. They rely heavily on anecdotal evidence, emotional appeals. They build these incredibly insular worlds where the core beliefs are just fiercely resistant to any factual correction from the outside.
It's that group polarization effect in action.
Textbook case. And remember, it's not just politics or conspiracies. Religious and cultural echo chambers exist too. Individuals might only be exposed to narratives that reinforce their specific group's worldview, which can sometimes lead to a real disconnect from broader society. Even the really fast-paced short video platforms, think TikTok, Dewey and their algorithms, are incredibly good at figuring out what keeps you watching.
Scary good sometimes.
Right. And they can create these intense echo chambers very quickly, leading to rapid amplification of certain views, sometimes extreme ones, especially among younger users who spend a lot of time there.
Wow, okay. That paints a pretty grim forecast if we just let things continue like this. But the good news, I guess, based on your sources, is that this isn't necessarily an unsolvable problem, right?
Right, there's definitely hope.
They actually lay out some surprisingly practical strategies, things that individuals and the platforms themselves could do to try and break out of these patterns. So this is where it gets really interesting. What can we actually do? Okay, strategy one, algorithmic transparency. This is more on the platforms. The idea is they could be much more open about how their recommendation algorithms actually work. Let users understand why they're seeing certain content.
Demystify the process of the...
Exactly. And maybe even offer users more control, like options to consciously diversify their feeds. Imagine like a toggle switch. Show me more perspectives I might disagree with.
That would be powerful.
Second, media literacy education. This is crucial. Educating users starting young, but really for everyone, about things like confirmation bias, selective exposure, how to spot misinformation, how to think critically about sources.
Equipping people with the tools to navigate this complex information landscape.
Yeah, empowering them to recognize when they might be in an echo chamber and encouraging them to proactively look beyond it. Third strategy, cross-cutting exposure. Sounds a bit academic, but the idea is simple. Actively encouraging engagement, real conversations between people from different backgrounds or with opposing views.
Breaking down the walls.
Right. The sources suggest this can genuinely reduce polarization and foster more understanding, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes. Fourth, fact-checking and moderation. This is controversial sometimes, but important.
Platforms implementing stronger, more consistent mechanisms to identify and reduce the spread of outright misinformation, and maybe promoting more credible, reliable sources.
Finding that balance between free expression and, preventing harmful falsehoods from dominating.
It's a balance.
And fifth, and this one's really key, user agency. This is all about empowering you, the user, to take control back. It means consciously making the effort to seek out diverse perspectives, maybe following news outlets you wouldn't normally read or engaging respectfully in civil discourse with people you disagree with, taking active steps.
Exactly. It helps break that passive cycle of just consuming what the algorithm feeds you. It puts the power back in your hands. So as you can hopefully see from all this, echo chambers and filter bubbles, they're a really complex issue, multifaceted, and they have these significant implications, right, for democratic discussion, for public understanding, for just how well we all get along, social cohesion. They're clearly reinforced by, both the technology, the algorithms, but also by these deeply ingrained human biases we all have. But importantly, what our sources also show is that mitigation is possible. It takes conscious effort, yes, from platforms and from us as individuals, but we're not powerless here. What really stands out to me most from this deep dive, reflecting on the sources, and what I really hope you, listening, take away, is just how widespread this issue feels and the profound impact it seems to be having on our collective ability to just engage respectfully with each other. Some of the sources were quite stark, making it clear that a lot of the hatred, the low tolerance, the really disrespectful behavior we see online is largely fueled by people being locked in these echo chambers.
Yeah.
It leads to this environment where, as one source put it quite powerfully, increasingly frequent and sometimes violent actions occur, driven by this polarization. It really does feel like society might be on a kind of ticking clock. And if we don't consciously work, all of us, to bridge these divides, to understand different perspectives, well, the consequences could be pretty dire. And this really raises an important question, I think, for all of us to mull over. What responsibility do we each individually hold right now to help diffuse that potential ticking time bomb? How can we consciously make the effort to seek understanding, even when it takes us way beyond our comfort zones?